Welcome to the True Wealth Investors Real Estate Podcast. Creative investing strategies to help you build true wealth. I'm your host, Chad Harris.
Okay, super. So Chad has asked me to do a little bit of discussion on using private money. I need to get this off the screen. Hold on a second. There we go. On using basically other people's money for buying apartments, but I also buy commercials. So we'll talk a little about that too, and give you an idea of who and what we're talking about. And as you all know, I am not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. I don't play one on TV. I don't have any sort of certification, financial planner. I'm not a real estate agent, and all that sort of thing. So everything I tell you is involving your own degree of financial risk. So one of the things I had to do as I started thinking about this is I needed to talk about apartments and define and describe some of the things involving apartments. So, as you know, apartments are defined as 5 or more doors in Ohio. When you talk about apartment people, you talk about how many doors you own. So, 5 or more doors in Ohio is considered an apartment. A 4-door unit is considered a house. None of the rules for single-family homes apply to apartments. And I mean none of the rules for single-family homes apply to apartments. So all the things that you learned as a single-family home person, particularly in selling or in renting, does not apply to apartments at all. Now, rent requirements are still there, but it does, all the things about ownership doesn't apply. So I'm going to give you some examples of what's normally considered. So 5 to 16 doors normally considered for individual buyers. And let me tell you exactly what that means. Hold on a second. I've got us hopping up right here. Okay, there we go. So what that means is that I've got a buddy of mine, a past partner in Cincinnati, who buys 9-door, 11-door, 14-door units. He buys those generally from individual buyers, families. In other words, they've owned them, they're selling them, or they haven't kept them up, or they've decided they don't want to keep them anymore. So what's happened there is that, there we go. What's happened there is that when you're talking to 5 to 16 doors, you can generally do what we do for single family homes. You can negotiate a deal, you can do seller financing, you can involve private money, of course, or other people's money, but in most cases, people are buying those to acquire them. I think he's got a 9, 11, and a 14. Each one is, in fact, all 3 of those are considered under one LLC. So that's where the change occurs. Around 20 plus doors are considered commercial with dedicated LLCs. So what that means is that if I've got an apartment complex called Parliament House, I have a LLC called Parliament House LLC. It is tied, it's dedicated to that particular project. Okay, so with 20 plus doors, you now own buildings, streets, garages, sidewalks, and dumpsters. Most people don't understand that. You now own buildings, you now own streets, you have street signs. You have to take care of those streets. You own garages, you own sidewalks. Sidewalks have to be cleaned, sidewalks have to be, removed of snow, and you own a dumpster or 2 or 3. Almost all 20 plus have commercial agents as seller representatives. There's very, very few times you're going to find somebody who owns a 32 or a 33 just owned by a family, and they put it up on, whatever the local thing is. They're not going to do that. They're going to hire a commercial agent. There are people who are just commercial agents. That's all they do. I know 3 of them. They don't sell homes. They don't do anything involving homes. They just sell commercial properties. You can find commercial properties on LoopNet, Crexi, CoStar, and a number of other places. Okay, so apartment purchasing process is a little bit different. So the big thing to remember, and this is the cool part of it, is everything in buying an apartment, and I'll separate also by saying commercial, is negotiable. I have had agents who thought the deal was so good, they actually took their commission and said, I don't want my commission, I want to be part of the deal. There is some seller financing, but it's involved in a smaller, it's involved behind the commercial loan. There's deferred maintenance. One of the properties I bought had, we got the owners for $25,000 worth of deferred maintenance on windows. So there is all kind, I mean, negotiations for this can take months. I've never done one of these where it doesn't take at least 90 days to 120 days and sometimes longer. And as I said, go ahead.
Math issue for some time now. I asked storekeepers to have people pull down their masks before even temporarily.
I didn't hear him.
Did you have a question, Paul?
Okay.
I'll go ahead and mute.
Just mute. Yeah, mute them. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, when you purchase a commercial property or an apartment, you use what's called a letter of intent. Now, the letter of intent is not an offer to buy. It is an intention of going to a contract. So you begin your first negotiation there. You talk to the owner about, okay, you want so much money, I'm going to give you this much money in a commercial loan, I'm going to give you this much money in cash. I expect to have deferred maintenance done on this. You've done, the carpets in the hallways are terrible, I want those replaced. I want deferred maintenance on that. I want to transfer the roof warranty. All those things go into the letter of intent, along with your statement for due diligence. Now, due diligence is it's at least a 45-day process. You go through all of their cost segregation studies, all of their any of their things they've done. You're also looking for such things as, is the apartment, has it ever been passed by anything EPA? Is there paint buried in the backyard? In addition, apartment purchasing process is generally a 5-year period. The reason why it's a 5-year period is because that's what the commercial banks offer. So when you do this sort of deal, you are talking about saying to your investors that this is a long-term process, at least 5 years. Some of them are a lot shorter, but we'll talk about that in the beginning. Okay, my experience has been with a mix of private and commercial. I gotta get this thing out of the way. How do I get this thing out of the way? There we go. Private and commercial funding. Apartment worth, by the way, so this is the other difference. We do comps for single-family homes. It had nothing to do with comps for apartments. Apartment worth is based upon net operating income and cap rate. Net operating income divided by property value. So to figure that out, you have to use your APOD, which is the annual property operating data. Hopefully the seller has one. If not, you need to create it. This is a really complicated spreadsheet, for lack of a better word. And this will list all of the income coming from the property. And remember, on an apartment, the income could be a variety of things. In one unit that I had, one apartment complex I had income coming from a washing machine, a laundromat. I had income coming from a parking garage. So you have to understand that the income is not just rent. The income is, a number of different things. You could also, there are people who move in and they want something special. You can rent that to them. So there's a lot, again, none of the things that apply to single-family homes apply here. Commercial loans will finance approximately 70% LTV. That's a great number, but in the commercial business, you're dealing with a totally different lender. It's not the people you deal with for homes. It's not the same banks. It may be the same name, but you're talking to a totally different person because they're looking at the net operating income and the cap rate for the property. They don't care about anything else. They want to know what that is. That's what they base their value on. So when I say 70%, I said approximately. I have, on a really good deal, I've seen them offer 82%. On a really bad deal, I've seen them offer 65%. So don't assume you're going to get 70% on a commercial loan. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, the next line tells you that. A $3.2 million purchase needs $960,000 at closing. That's cash. That's where we have to get the private investors or other people's money. Now, so you do the math there, and there's 70%, there's 960, but additional cash will be for soft costs. Well, wait a second. I've got to pay for my lawyer. I got to put together a PPM. I got to put together my LLC. I got to put together all these things. In general, we spend anywhere from $12,000 to $18,000 in soft costs just for legal and other events. So there may also be soft costs of, okay, I understand that I've negotiated with the seller. He's not going to touch the blacktop in the back of the property. It's got holes in it. It floods. It's got a problem. I need some cash up front. That's a soft cost. You know, I gotta do something right away for this property to even begin to start to get better. Very rarely you're going to buy a property that is 100% occupied. In fact, 100% occupied is even accepted by commercial loans. They're going to accept either a 10%, sometimes a 5%, but mostly it'll be 10% occupancy. So it'll be 90% or 95%. So they'll accept a 5 to 10% non-occupant ownership. And that's just based upon what they're going to loan and what you're going to have to come up with as cash. So all these things affect how you set up your deal. Soft costs can also be, let's say you have to do a survey of the land. There was a property that we had that had a triangular shaped piece of ground behind the property, and we could not figure out if we owned it or somebody else owned it. And it was filled with junk and had 4 or 5 different people's fences around it. And so we had to spend some money to a person who was, is that you? You're gonna do that, Chad?
Yep, got it.
Okay. Okay. So those were soft costs are. Okay, so I need to get that off my screen. Okay. So going back to here, I said, remember, net operating income and cap rate are basically what people understand. So in the examples I'm going to show you, those were from the world of a 10% cap rate. That was back in 2012, 13, 14, 15. We are no longer in a 10% cap rate. We are in a 7% cap rate. You need to understand this. This is going to affect how much money you need to bring to the table. Here's an example down here. If the NOI, that's net operating income, is that value at an 8% cap rate, the present value of the property is $3.5 million. Same property, same NOI, at 7.5, it's 3.8, and at 7%, it's 4,992,114 present value. So the same property from 8 to 7 is $500,000 more you have to bring to the table. So understanding that when I say this is a 7% cap rate market, it's going to be a 7% cap rate market for a long time. The 10% cap rate was, in the commercial world, was kind of an aberration because people bought apartment complexes with the idea they had a 3.7 or 4.2% loan, which is a commercial rate at that time. Now, remember, those loans have to refi. So 5% years later, now they're at 6.5, 7, 8, 9%. Is the numbers they used going to work? Nope, they're not. So you will see some properties going up for sale where basically the owners, in selling the property because they can't keep it working anymore, are going to have to bring cash to the table. So that's why I say understand this and accept the fact we are in a 7% cap rate market. Okay, what does all that mean? Well, here's the buying partners. Here's the buying part of the project. So I've got a project, and there's multiple types of partners, but I'm going to highlight the important ones. The managing partners. Now, the managing partners are the people that run the show. There's usually 2, maybe 3, but in generally 2 or 3. Okay, these are the folks that decide what's going to get done. They hire the landscapers, they hire the people that shovel the snow, they fix the things, they rehab the property, they fix the roof, they fix the windows. They're the ones that control the money flow through the property. In general, those are the people who are managing the property. Now, they may be the owners, or they may be put in place by somebody else. Now, remember, everything is on the table in this business, but in the projects that I've been involved in, the managing partners are also the owners. Now, the second part, the sponsor equity investor partners, I don't really talk about, but in the last 8 or maybe 6 to 8 weeks, I have been involved in 2 things where I thought I'd bring this up. So a sponsor equity investor, last week, a gentleman told me that he is working on a deal for an office building where the owner of the office building wants to convert it to condominiums. So he is going to bring the cost of the office building to the table. He is not a managing partner. He is a sponsor equity investor partner. They have the right to say, I agree with the managing partners, we're going to sell the property, or we're going to buy the property, or we're going to do this. They can only agree to very major things. They can't agree to if we're going to change windows, none of that sort of stuff. They can only agree to major decisions made by the managing partners. And usually that's, am I going to put this up for sale or not? Or am I going to refi the loan, or what am I going to do? Second thing I'm working in right now, I'm actually working on this project myself, is I have a person who brought to the table a large, about 70 acres worth of land. They want this land to either become a trailer park, or we don't call it trailer parks anymore. These are tiny home parks, or they want it to become a commercial investment. And we can do that. They don't want any part of it. They just want to bring, so they're going to bring the land. Let's say that, I'll throw a number out there. Let's say that this whole project is going to be $10 million. The land is worth $500,000. So they're going to own approximately 5% of the deal because they're bringing the land. But they can't control anything other than the couple things we talked about. Those are all defined in all the investment documents that you create. We're going to talk primarily about Class A investors, also called preferred equity partners. And that's where we get into the other people's money. We'll touch on Class Bs in the second example. Now, here's the other part of this. In a commercial property, there is experienced partners, deal maker partners, finance partners, and a whole range of project management partners. It's unbelievable. Let's give you an example about the finance partner. There is 2 people I'm aware of who, if you want to buy a $4 million property, and you and your partner, your managing partner, have put up, let's say you put up $300,000 for that, but you're nowhere near the 3 or 4 million you need. And let's say you already own other properties, so your equity, your value is good, but you don't quite have enough to pull off that. So you bring in a finance partner who's sitting on $10 million or something like that. All he does is sign a piece of paper and says, yeah, I backed the loan. Thanks a lot, Mr. Commercial Bank. And you pay them 2%. There are experienced partners who you may pay 3%. So it's an interesting deal because you've got a lot of other people involved in the deal. Okay, let's talk about Class A investors. So, or equity partners, equity investors. So a Class A partner purchases shares of the defined investment, which can also translate into a percentage of the value of the property when sold. Now, again, all of this is up in the air. All of this has to meet your needs for the ability to sell and work the property and turn a profit. So if you have looked at the APOD and you said, I can turn this thing around in 3 years, then I am going to offer because remember, in 3 years, the investor may get nothing. At the end of 3 years, they get a pretty big return. So I will offer them an incentive. The incentive is I'm going to offer them the share is going to be a percentage of the value of the property. Maybe a share is worth a certain percentage. I can also offer them a yearly profit. Okay, so Class A investor partners get paid any yearly profits first before all other partners, including managing partners. So nobody gets any money until the Class A investor gets paid. So Class A investor partners are defined in the offering memorandum. And more importantly, Class A investors are required to be vetted. So by that, we have to follow the SEC regulations on this. You cannot advertise, and everything advertised has to have a disclaimer on it. And when you vet the person, you send them a questionnaire, and the questionnaire goes something in the line of, if you purchase 4 shares of this property and you've invested $100,000, do you have enough money to support this? We don't want you to we're not having you take a loan on your main home to be able to do this. We don't want you to go bankrupt because you invested in these things, because you're not going to get money back for 2, 3, 4 years. So here's the first deal. And this was, again, Cap 10 environment. And this is a buy and hold project. And so we got a property and remember that it's going to be a lot more expensive now, but Cap 10 project, $2.4 million negotiated purchase price, including holdbacks and deferrals. A 5-year renewable commercial loan was obtained. $775,000 upfront was required. Now, if you do the 70%, you realize that $775,000 is more than $720,000, which would be the amount the bank's going to require. But this property needed some work. So that was more soft cost there. The managing partners invested $400,000 of their own money. $375,000 was sought on a private placement memorandum. Okay, so when you do a private placement memorandum, you have the memorandum, which is a lengthy document, and you have an executive summary. So if somebody shows an interest in your investment, you pass them the executive summary. The executive summary lists all of your plans for this property and what your thoughts are on how this property is going to achieve the goals that you've set forward. This is all well laid out, and somebody says, okay, I'm going to invest in this. You give them an offer questionnaire. In this particular case, Class A investors elected to participate at various share levels. In this particular case, each share was $25,000. So if you bought 2 shares, you invested $50,000. Okay, so all this is in place. Now, I've skipped over a lot of paperwork and things like that because I want to get to the point of where we're at in the project. So remember, I said there were 2 ways to get income on this. So Class A investors' return the first year was 0%. All the money was plowed into the property. All the money was, plowed into either the managing the property and bringing the property up to speed, things like that. So there was no return at all. So at 12 months, your $50,000 earned you nothing. Year 2, at 24 months, you had a return of 2.7%. Okay. Year 3, at 36 months, there was a return of 6.5%. Okay. This is pretty good. The year 3. That means the property is starting to, the ship's coming back up. It's floating in the water. Everything's looking pretty good. Income's coming in. And at year 3.5, managing partners elected to refi and buy out the Class A investors. Now, okay, so now you have some people that say, whoa, wait a second. I was looking for a 5-year deal. I was looking for year 3, year 4, and year 5, and possibly getting a piece of the back end. I want to know what's going on here. So the refi process and buying out the Class A investors, which, by the way, was part of the deal. There's part of the investment process. And there's a paragraph in there that says managing partners can elect to refi the property and buy out the Class A investors. Okay, so the way in which it was done to make sure everybody was happy is investors return upon refi invested amount, a total return of 34% plus 100% of invested amount came back. So if you invested $100,000, you got a check for $34,000. That's not everything, of course, because you got something else. You got a piece of the net return. So you could have gotten more money than that. So everybody was pretty happy with that particular deal. And now the managing partners are on their own with just 1 or 2 other experienced partners in the deal. Okay, second deal. Now this is a fix and flip. And again, remember, this is a Cap 10 environment. We negotiated a price of $675,000 on this particular project. It was a 22-door thing. There was maintenance deferrals, a lot of maintenance deferrals. This was a very hard negotiation because the owner was elderly and his one daughter was a lawyer and his other son was an accountant. So we had a lot of negotiations. And basically it came down to, we said, look, we'll let you go on some things, but other things we have to do maintenance deferrals on. They would not do any seller financing. This guy wanted to cash out, and the children wanted him to have the money. So we ended up with obtaining a commercial loan. Managing partners invested $100,000 of their own money. We invested $100,000 of our own money. We needed $60,000 in additional funds. So we used something called a private equity representation process. This is not a PPM. This is people that I've known a long time, maybe part of a client base or something like that. And I said, look, I'm looking for a mezzanine investor. That's what a mezzanine investor is. I agreed at the time to 9% annual, and we paid quarterly. They don't get a piece of the project. They don't get a piece of the sale. They don't get none of that. They get 9% on their money paid quarterly. One person stepped forward and they invested the entire $60,000. Okay, we originally bought this as a fix and flip. There was a lot. The first 2 years was no money whatsoever, although we did pay the mezzanine investor because that was part of our deal. So, but we got no money whatsoever, and pretty much 2.5 years in, we got no money whatsoever. We had a lot of work to do. We had a whole driveway that had to be repaired. We had roof repair. We had windows to be replaced. We actually rehabbed 18 of the units, and we moved people around to get them out. We improved the property dramatically. We took care of a lot of things. One thing I learned in this process, by the way, is that I will never buy a 22 door again. I will always go for the larger units, because when you sign a deal to have snow removal, you are behind all the other apartment complexes. So if you're dealing with, if they got 100 door deals in there, you're going to get your snow shoveled by 1 o'clock in the afternoon because you're the smaller guy. We actually sold the project at 3.8 years into the agreement. And the reason we did that is because literally people came forward and offered us a silly amount of money. And so we sold the project. Now, in this particular case, the mezzanine investor got his $60,000 back plus the 9% annual paid quarterly. That's all they got. Any questions on that? Okay, I'll go ahead. I don't have that many more slides. Yeah, I think that's it. You never make the shots you do not take. So, questions? So I'll go back and I'll start talking about some other things right now. The big deal in this business right now is that I think within the next year, you're going to see more and more people who had a very low interest rate refi their loan or try to refi, and they're not going to make money. So I think that next year, you're going to see an opportunity to buy pretty good sized apartment complexes using these types of processes. Now, I showed you two types of processes. There are an infinite number. You can, I mean, as much as you can negotiate the deal, but I showed you one where we used private money through a PPM, and another one where we used private equity representation we just simply paid them cash. We understand that an apartment deal, you're not, unless you're part of the mezzanine type investor person, you're not getting any money the first couple of years. You invest your money, you're not going to get any of that money. Let's go back and get that. So you may get something the second year, you may not get something the second year. What you have to do is you have to say, look, is there going to be an opportunity? And you have to plan this out. So when you do this, when you put these deals together using the annual property operating data, the APOD, you have to say how much I think I'm going to be able to return to my investors. Now, it may come to naught. You could lose all your money. The thing could go down the tubes, but it's highly unlikely because in an apartment complex, there's always the building there. There's always cash flow coming in unless you buy it. And I mean, I know a guy who bought it a 65 unit of which only 21 doors were rented. And there was water in another one and other things. I'll give you some examples. People run into trouble in apartment complexes and they don't have enough money to be able to repair things. So you may start seeing units, doors drop off the system. So if you've got a 65 door and you've got 10 units that are not operable at all because they need a lot of money to repair, then you really have a 55 door unit. And that's all the cash you've got coming in the door. So you have to really understand that when you put together a deal in an apartment complex, you have to have all of this knowledge up front. You have to understand, what am I going to pay? What do I think the investors are going to make? What is my plan? What is, you as the owner, the managing partner plan for this investment? If you don't know what that is, you bring in an experienced partner. And there are people out there who have done this day in and day out, and they'll come in for 3% and they'll help you out with us. So the advantage of this is that you have a lot of people who can help you with this process.
So what would you say, Mike, are some of the benefits to doing apartment complexes over single family homes? Why tackle 22 door complex instead of just 22 houses?
Well, one thing, it's all under two roofs. In this case, it was under two roofs. But the other part of it is that 22 and above, you can start hiring property managers. And so if you want to be an owner, you can hire a property manager that will, in fact, take a percentage of your income, but will also make sure that the grass is cut, everything's trimmed, blown, snow is removed, the dumpster gets emptied, people don't throw their crap on the outside of the dumpster. They take care of the property, particularly in the larger units, 65, 88, and 100. I was in 104 for a couple of years too. You have people who can manage this. Now, can you do it yourself? You sure can. But you can also have somebody manage it. Now, yeah, you can manage individual houses, but if you have all of your properties under two roofs, and it's a lot easier to take care of, you have a lot less things to worry about because you don't have as many, you don't have as many yards, you don't have as many things like that. It's really, that's an advantage, but if you want to do single families, and I've got single families in my portfolio, and I like them and I will keep them. There's advantages to both. Again, getting back to the thing where everything is everything is different. None of the single family home rules apply to apartments. So all of the things that are being passed in law right now, and we were just up at the State House, as we mentioned, are all applying to single family homeowners. Don't apply to apartments. So you kind of get away from that. Blessing Game out of Cincinnati doesn't really care if you own a 200 unit apartment complex, but he does care if you own more than 50 houses. So, that's kind of the difference there. It also, you can kind of, there's and I'm sure there's for single family homes too, but there are database programs that basically set up so that if a person wants to rent your property, they get on your website, they apply right there, they put their credit card if they got one, or they do some sort of deposit right there. Almost all of the apartment complexes I know now deal with either direct deposit or some version of that. Nobody deals with checks anymore. It just doesn't make sense. So they deal with some sort of investment like that, and that's all dealt with through the programs. And there's 2 or 3 large programs out there that cost money a month to maintain, but they do manage all that for you, and they set up your website and make sure that's good. So you can kind of back away from it. One of the things that a lot of people who own multiple units do, or multiple apartment complexes do, is they manage the property managers. So once a month or once every 2 weeks, they'll come in and they'll expect a report from the property manager about what got done. And they look at, again, there's a significant amount of data that you grab from these database programs. And you look at that and you go, oh, wait a second. How come I'm at 84% occupancy? What's going on here? The property manager says, well, we've got 2 doors down right now. We're rehabbing them. We had a water leak in this one, and we had to move somebody around there. And you expect an answer. And if you don't get the answer, then you find a new property manager. And property managers generally, for large apartment complexes, are dedicated people. This is what they do. They don't own, I've had people say, well, I do 240 single family homes. How can you possibly do that unless you have a pretty big crew? But if I do 240 doors and they're in 4 buildings, well, that's easier to take care of.
Seems like a lot of people get into and being passive investors in apartment buildings for the tax benefits, especially if they have high incomes or some other active business that generates a lot of cash. Can you go through kind of what some of the tax benefits are for apartments that's a little different than a single family?
Yeah, happy to. It's a good question. So there are people who are sitting on money. In fact, the mezzanine investor is a past client of mine. And he basically told me one day, he says, I'm sitting on all this cash. And at that time, he was earning like 0.2% or 0.3% on his money. And he said, if there's anything you can do for me, I'd appreciate it. And I've had people come forward. In his particular case, he had his money. He had money in the bank, but he decided that he was going to move that to a Roth IRA. He paid the the money, the taxes for that. Once he moved to the Roth IRA, that 9% was coming to him tax-free. So that's one way to do it. You can also invest through your Roth 401k. So there are people sitting on a lot of money right now, and I mean really, there is. I'm dealing with some folks out of Chicago, and I'm a project I'm working on right now. I'm dealing with a gentleman out of Texas, and they're telling me that there is so much cash sitting there right now that if you've got a deal, you can find people who will invest in your property for you. It's got to be a good deal. It's got to be a deal that makes sense. the tax is right now, capital gains, long-term capital gains would be 11%. Depending upon who wins the White House in the fall, that could go away. And in fact, there's some discussion about that moving into the much higher percentage rate like it used to be back in the late 90s and 2000s. So that's the benefit right now. It may not be a benefit in the future. But there is other benefits because of the deductions that we can take for the apartment complex. Remember I said there's a lot of things going on here. There's building depreciation, there's street, garage, sidewalks, dumpster depreciation. No, not dumpsters, actually. In most cases, you either own or rent the dumpsters. But you can do pretty sizable depreciation. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we've seen is a lot of times, particularly around year 10 or year 12, if you want to buy and hold, they're going to sell the property because they've already depreciated it. You know, they use fast depreciation. And so they're selling the property to buy another property so they can depreciate that property. And there's the tax benefits there. And those have to be, they don't have to be, but it's, if you want to keep your investors, you want to treat your investors well. So like in the 88 unit where the people had thought they were going to be in it for a 5-year deal, and the people decided to get them out a year and a half early. Well, the pot had to be sweetened to make those people happy. And the next time they came out and asked for money, most of those same people came forward with their cash. So, you know, it was, you know, you need to understand, you treat your investors well in this. You make money, they make money.
Is there it seems like with apartment complexes, if you're looking for off-market deals, the actual owner is always hidden behind the LLC, right? Is there a good way to actually contact owners of apartment complexes that aren't listed?
Well, up to now, no, but if the CTA goes through at the end of this year, the corporate thing, we'll all be out there, including our home address and our driver's license will all be available to the government. So yeah, and you know as well as I do, that may come out. There's a couple ways to do it. You can, in most cases, and particularly all the cases that I have been involved in, you know, the lawyer is your person who puts together your LLC. So there's no knowledge of me. And, you know, there's no knowledge of the owner or the manager. It is sometimes possible to backtrace through the PPM, but there's been a lot of people who put doors on that and lock those doors. So it's kind of difficult to do that, but there's nothing wrong with sending a letter to to the main address. Say, hey, I'm interested in your property. Now, one of the things that, moving away from apartments, one of the things that we did when we were looking at self-storage is that we actually took a letter and walked up to the door of the self-storage, and the people behind the counter, who generally aren't the owners, sometimes they are, and we said, hey, could you get this to the owner? We're interested in buying this property. Now, either they throw it in the trash can, or they are the owner, or they give it to the owner. And again, in commercial deals, you can wait a year. I know somebody who handed a letter to somebody, and a year and a half later, they gave them a call. So don't throw away your letter. Don't think I didn't get anything out of there, because it can be a year and a half, sometimes 2 years later. And all of a sudden you get a call saying, hey, you know, I got this letter from you. I'm ready to sell now. And you're like, oh yeah, what property are you interested in selling? What was the name of your property again? So, you know, that's not true. That's, you know, that it's an interesting business, and nothing moves quickly in this business. As I said, it can take, I mean, I've never seen anything take less than 90 days, and sometimes it take a lot. So in the agreements that you sign with your contract, you want to put something like an extension, like the one on the 22 unit apartment, we extended it twice beyond the 90 days to bring this thing home. Because again, the daughter was a lawyer and the son was an accountant, and they kept bringing up complaints and this and that, and wanted daddy to get as much money as they could. And that makes sense, obviously. I never actually met the gentleman who owned it. I just met his children. So, so you know that you've got the ability to negotiate your way through things. And if the deal isn't to your liking, then you can always back out. Remember, the LOI is only an offer. It is not a commitment. If you look at the LOI and you go through due diligence and you say, hey, I'm not interested in this deal after I've done due diligence, then you walk away.
We are adding new episodes every week, so make sure and subscribe and check out all of our content at truewealthinvestors.com.